बस बस छोटा ही रखिए, क्योंकि अभी ये चैट वाला बॉक्स हटाइए तो कैसे।
Hello.
Please try again. Thank you.
वो बता दिए थे। तो अभी जो है ना, जब से लॉकडाउन लगा है तब से रंगोली बिल्कुल नहीं आ रहा है, तो क्या करें?
आप गलत बोल रहे, रंगोली नहीं उसको कहते, बोलते हैं जोश।
हाँ,
रंगोली अब थोड़े आता है, रंगोली तो 300 साल पहले आता था। तो
वो भी नहीं जो है उसके साथ
पेपर जो है होता है विद्यार्थी के लिए, है ना, वो जो निकलता है वैकेंसी सब चीज एडवाइस दिया
वो
जाता
तो ठीक है, लेकिन अब जन जागरण में नहीं आ रहा है, तो क्या करें?
हाँ,
जागरण जोश नहीं
छोड़ दीजिए, नहीं आता है छोड़ दीजिए।
नहीं मेरे क्लास में कोई बच्चा बोल
बाहर से बंद कर दो, दरवाजा भी बंद कर दो। हाँ, ताला मार दो, कहना कि ये 1 बजे मिले, 1 बजे तक है। बाहर से बंद कर दो, दरवाजा भी बंद कर दो।
Now I'm going to begin the webinar with the Vice Chancellor, Sir. Albert Suze Georgie says, "Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought." With this beautiful quotation, I would like to wish a very good morning to all. This morning is cheerful indeed. Of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Veer University, Professor Devi Prasad Tiwari, sir, whose mission is nation building through education and beyond, and whose dream is to make each student of Jagjiwan College, Ara, a success story. We are truly blessed today that our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, has graced the occasion with his presence. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you, sir. I also welcome my principal, Jagjiwan College, Ara, Professor Jawan, who has always encouraged me and supported me to take this initiative in organizing this program. I will also take opportunity to warmly welcome from core of my heart our chief guest, Professor Shankar Dutt, retired head Department of English, Patna University, Patna, and my mentor. It is indeed a privilege to welcome the most honored and esteemed speakers, academicians of great intellect, Professor T. Mark, Sir, Department of English, Pondicherry University, Dr. Smriti Ma'am, Associate Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Patna, Dr. Prabhakar Palaka, Sir, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Swami Shraddhanand College, University of Delhi, Dr. K.M. Ziauddin, Sir, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Manu, Hyderabad. I also welcome my esteemed co-conveners, my colleagues, all the members of my college family, intellectuals, audience, which include academicians and my dear students. With these positive vibes, I would now present a brief concept note before this August gathering. Sharan Kumar Limbale says, by Dalit literature, in writing about Dalits by Dalit writers with Dalit consciousness. The form of Dalit literature is inherent in its Dalitness, and its purpose is obvious: to inform Dalit society to its slavery and narrates its pain and suffering to upper caste Hindu. In academia, we have discussed a lot about several schools of thoughts and disciplines, such as idealism, existentialism, nihilism, Marxism, post-colonialism, but we are spectacularly silent to have our dialogue actively on Dalit literature. It's a high time to focus our research and writing on Dalit and subaltern studies. The webinar is mainly concerned around the Dalit discourses, and it critiques the repressive ideology, agencies, and institutions that made Dalits remain poor, wretched, broken, and marginalized socially, economically, religiously, and it also aims to demand egalitarian and just society. The title of the webinar, Quest for Equality in Unequal India, a dialogue on Dalit literature, gender, aesthetic, art, and activism, opens many possibilities of discussion to share a wide range of study for research scholars, students, and academicians. Dalit literature is purposive in nature. It precisely defines its purpose as a revolutionary, transformational, and liberatory. It compiles and narrates painful experience and battle against a cancerous ideology like caste system. Sharad Kumar Mukti, in his essay, What is Dalit Literature, defines Dalit literature is a literature produced by Dalit consciousness. Human freedom is the inspiration behind it, that is its implied value. The nature of Dalit literature consists in rebellion against oppression, structural violence, suppression done on Dalits in the past, even in the present, in the frame of Varnashram system. Not a single day passes for Dalits in the caste-ridden society of India that we do not come across the atrocious behavior of dominant caste reported in the newspaper or some other forms of media agency. We come across a number of incidents happens with Dalit as segregating, slighting, shunning, burning of huts, killing, persecution, boycott, rapes, witch hunting, grabbing land, stripping and pirating naked girls naked, and this is of sexual nature towards Dalit women, so on. Advent of freedom gave hope for Dalit that all sorts of injustices and uh, inequality will be down and annihilated. But it was not abolished at all. But it shows that India has been unequal on every count of social indicators for dispossessed or Dalits. The above incidents are narrated in the following famous Dalit writings such as Om Prakash Valmiki Juthan, Daya Pawar's Baluta, Baby Kamble, The Prison We Broke, Sharan Kumar Limbale, The Outcast, Kumud Paude, Antasport, Shankar Rao Kharat, A Corpse in the Well, Rohinton Mystery, A Fine Violence, Arundhati Rai, The God of a Small Thing, and Anand's Untouchable, Raja Rao Kanthapura, Santa Rameshwar Rao, Children of God, Bama Sangati, and Karuku, and so on. Dalit literature is taking a wider acceptability with the spirit of Dalitness. Dalit writers are constituting their own perspective and agency for representation. Let us discuss gender, aesthetic, arts, and activism. Dalit women have their own issues of Dalit identity, but at the same time, they also face patriarchy as a universal social indicator of inequality and injustice that need to be discussed and understood. Aesthetic in the mainstream literature is concerned with the concept of beauty that gets around the feeling of pleasure and empathy aroused by viewing the object. But Dalit's literature takes its weapon as aesthetic on the basis of pain or suffering that is its distinct identity of literature. Art is truly a manifestation of ideas, For Dalit literature, art is occupying a distinct space in order to procure civic consciousness and becoming the voice of voices. The evolution of Dalit literature or Dalit painting resists the dominant social norms and attain agency to assert oneself. As Dalit women were forced to wear iron or inferior material just to distinguish their low identity, they created own Godna painting with natural colors from the cow dungs, leaves, vegetables, and flowers, and so on. Jamuna Devi and Savinder Savarkar have been famous Dalit painters. Remembering heroes Jyotiba Phule and Dr. Ambedkar, whose writing and speeches and activism as well inspiration of Dalit literature. Their works have enabled future generation of Dalits to assert themselves as subject through political activism, organizing, literary, and critical writing. The webinar will serve as a platform for knowledge creation, and its dissemination will be instrumental to students, UG and PG, research scholar, academician, to add new dimension in their writing thesis and research article. It will have various enlightening sessions on the critical issues and deep discussion and deliberation by eminent guest speakers. It gives me immense pleasure to share that we have received overwhelming response for webinar in terms of more than 900 registration. Some of the notable institutions are New York University, Britannia University, North and South University, Bangladesh, TU University, Nepal, most of the universities of Nigeria and Africa, Delhi University, Savitri Bai Phule University, Pune University, Calcutta, Jamia JNU, Patna University, Central University of Jharkhand and South Bihar, and Veer Kunwar University. I once again extend a warm welcome to all dignitaries, participants and students. Now I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Devi Prasad Tiwari sir, to address the August gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Devi Prasad Tiwari sir.
जी, हमारी आवाज पहुंच रही है आप तक?
जी सर, बिल्कुल।
अच्छा, तो सबसे पहले हम आपको बधाई देना चाहते हैं कि आपने जगजीवन कॉलेज के इंग्लिश डिपार्टमेंट में एक इस विषय को, जो अभी बहुत पॉपुलर नहीं है, उसको प्रारंभ करने का एक जो प्रयास किया, ये अस्तुत्य प्रयास कहा जाएगा। और इसकी आवश्यकता भी थी कि वीर कुंवर सिंह विश्वविद्यालय में ये शुरू किया जाए। और जगजीवन कॉलेज तो संयोग से आपको एक अच्छा प्राचार्य मिला है, वो नए नए पाठ्यक्रम, नए नए विषय, नए नए संस्थाओं, विश्वविद्यालयों से जोड़कर अध्यापन के कार्य में नई चीजें लाने की कोशिश कर रहा है। तो मैं आपके महाविद्यालय के प्राचार्य को भी बधाई दूंगा कि उन्होंने 2 दिनों का ये वेबिनार आयोजित किया। इसमें जितने भी शिक्षक, जितने भी विद्वान बाहर से आए हुए हैं और आपके इस वेबिनार में सम्मिलित होकर विषय के ऊपर गंभीर चर्चा पर चर्चा करेंगे, सबका वीर कुंवर सिंह विश्वविद्यालय की तरफ से हार्दिक स्वागत है, उनका अभिनंदन है। और आप लोग इस विषय पर अपनी जो भी राय बनाएं, वो राय अपने प्राचार्य के माध्यम से भेजिएगा और विश्वविद्यालय जो भी मदद करना की आवश्यकता होगी वो मदद करेगा। और बाबू जगजीवन राम जी के नाम पर कुछ उस महाविद्यालय में हमेशा होता रहे। हम लोग एक पीठ की स्थापना का भी प्रस्ताव भेजे हैं और उसमें भी सफलता मिलेगी। उनका नाम उस महाविद्यालय से जुड़कर अमर बना रहे, ये हमारी अपनी इच्छा है। चाहे जिस तरह से आप चाहेंगे, और उस कॉलेज को आगे ले जाने के लिए विश्वविद्यालय की तरफ से जो संभव सहायता होगी समय समय पर हम आपको देते रहेंगे। और पुनः आज के इस वेबिनार के सफल आयोजन के लिए हम अपनी शुभकामना प्रेषित करते हैं और आप सभी आयोजकों को बधाई देते हैं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, sir, for your precious words or wishes for us and giving us time. We are humbled and grateful for your continuous support and motivation. Thank you, sir. Now I request our principal, Professor Jawahar Lal, sir, to address this August gathering. Ayan bhai, Jawahar sir hain?
Audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, guests, and organizing committee. On today's national webinar on quest for equality in unequal India, a dialogue on Dalit literature, gender, aesthetic, art and activism. First of all, I would like to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor and Chief Patron of the webinar, Professor D.P. Tiwari ji, who has spared his valuable time for inauguration of webinar. Thank you very much, sir, for your inauguration. For Professor D.P. Tiwari is a great historian and archaeologist who has excavated more than 12 historical places of Uttar Pradesh and contributed a lot to Lucknow University and Government of Uttar Pradesh. Our college family is grateful to him for his kind presence and on this auspicious occasion, and indebted to him for uplifting our college. By his kind blessings, our college, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, our college has added new feathers in its cap by commencing Korean Language Study Center, BCA and PGA program, Diploma in Tourism and Travel Management and Personality Development, and financing courses, as well as honest attempt to set up Jagjiwan chair under his So first of all, I welcome our honorable, thankful to him for joining this webinar. In behalf of our college, I welcome our chief guest, Professor Shankar Ashish Dutt, former head of the Department of English, Patna University, Patna. I also welcome our guest of honor, Professor T. Max, Department of English, Pondicherry University, Dr. Smriti Singh, Associate Professor of English, IIT Patna, Dr. Prabhakar Palka, Department of English under Delhi University, and K.M. Ziauddin of Manu, Hyderabad. I also welcome all the teachers and scholars who are participating in this webinar. I am thankful to Dr. Aslam Parvez, Department of English and convener of webinar, who has spent sleepless nights and taken much pain to organize the webinar. I am also thankful to Dr. Navadun Ghosh, Department of English, and all the faculty members of our college who are participating in this webinar and encouraged to organize the program. So far the Dalit literature is concerned, it is one of the emerging disciplines in the faculty in the history of Indian writing in English, which has spread its wing across the nation and across the world. Dalit literature has been accepted by public and educational institutions. It has taken place in the syllabus of few universities. The literature covers pain, sufferings, and anxieties of Dalit, the most privileged class of the society from past to present. On this occasion, being the teacher of commerce, being the teacher of management, I would like to discuss more on inequality in India. So far, the inequality is concerned, and this means unfair situation in the society when some people have more opportunities than other people in the society, or not being equal in status, rights, and opportunities. It is a grave social injustice. Inequality may be classified in two parts, that is economic instability and social inequality. Inequality in one affects the inequality in another. Economic inequality includes income inequality and number second, wealth inequality. Income instability refers to disparity of income or income commanded by top percentile of population in comparison to the bottom percentile. Whereas the wealth inequality refers to disparity of property and financial assets or unequal distribution of assets in group of people. As 2019 data provided by the Government of India, top 10% people holds 77.4% of total national wealth, and top 1% richest people holds 51.53% of national wealth, whereas bottom 10% of Indian society holds only 0.2% of national wealth, and bottom 60% holds only 4.8% of national wealth. And this trend is growing upwards direction every year. The rich are becoming richer and poor are becoming poorer. There is a huge gap between rich and poor in India. So far, the social inequality is concerned, when resources in a given society are distributed in unequal manner and differential way is made of the social goods, resources in the society by power, religion, caste, gender, and sexual orientation. It is the outcome of inequality in income, education, gender, caste, and class. In the socially inequality, marginalized section of the society or Dalits are directly impacted in terms of getting job, access to essential utility. This increases a huge gap between rich and poor. In India, due to gender equality, women get 44% less wages than men. Upper caste individuals earn 47% more than lower caste. Christian, Persian, and Jain have larger share of income than Muslim and Buddhism. So these are the figure of social inequality and income inequality. The question arises, why there is inequality in the society? Actually, the same faulty agriculture structure. Agriculture structure is not satisfactory, and there is a downward trend in production. Unsatisfactory rural employment scheme distribution system, structure development in rural areas. The defective tax policy, fiscal policy, economic policy, and labor policy. Now the question is, what are the remedies? How we can reduce inequality in the society? That is the main heart of the topic of this seminar. So according to my opinion, there should be a balance between income stability and economic growth. We see the figure that economic growth in India is increasing, but although there is an instability in the society, we are actually going to be $5 trillion economy as per our Honorable Prime Minister, but there is an imbalance between rich and poor. Reduction of gap between rich and poor is increasing. For this, the government should frame time-bound target. There should be a time-bound program. If we have how to reduce the inequality or how we should reduce the gap. And there should be a certain action plan to reduce the gap. There should be a progressive tax system. Progressive tax system is a tax system by which we can charge more taxes from the richest people and less taxes from the poor. There should be a removal of under taxation of rich individuals and companies. What we see that rich individuals and companies are paying less taxes to the government by tax evasion and tax avoidance. So there should be elimination of tax avoidance and evasion by the corporates and the richest people. There should be equal opportunities for all. When the equal opportunities in education, in health, and in other sectors will be provided, then we can reduce the inequality between rich and poor. There should women, we are talking about the women empowerment. The women in empowerment, there is a need to be more strengthened. The privatization of essential services like health and education must be stopped at any cost. The government should try to provide more employment opportunities or generate employment, particularly in this COVID-19. We have seen how the marginalized class of people, the laborers, they are walking on the road. They are shifting from urban areas to rural areas. So governments should frame a special framework, an action plan to adjust these people in the rural area. And for generating the employment, and the reservation policy should not only be adopted only on the basis of caste, but also on the basis of income. Anyone who is poor, even of the upper caste, they should be provided reservation in job employment. In this way, we can quest equality in unequal India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your constant support and encouragement. With these words, now I request our today's chief guest, Professor Shankar A. Dutt, sir, to address. But before, I would take the opportunity to read his bio note. Professor Shankar Dutt retired as a head Department of English in Patna University in April 2020. He has been the former chairman of Bihar Sangeet Natak Academy and former principal, College of Arts and Crafts. Professor Dutt has been a UGC, British Council and American Center resource person for English studies and has lectured and chaired seminars at various eminent institutions. He is on the advisory board governing body, board of studies, and academic council of a number of universities and institutions, and a consultant for various international organizations. He has framed the master's and PhD course work syllabi in the universities of Bihar, Central University of South Bihar, Maulana Mazrul Haq University, and Nalanda Open University. Professor Dutt is the coordinator for collaborative research project with Tata Institute of Social Sciences and the guest editor for the second volume of Journal on Migration. A number of his research students have been Fulbright scholars hold distinguished positions in academia, the civil service, the judiciary, corporate houses, and in social service. He has been honored with a number of awards, including the Best Teacher Award by Patna University, the Frank Anthony Award, Rotary and Lions Club Awards for his teaching, research, and citizenship, Research Award by Patna University in 2019, and the Distinguished Xaverian Award. With this brief note, brief bio note, I request Professor Shankar Dutt, sir, to please address this August gathering.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Aslam Parvez.
Thank you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I don't mind if I'm not visible, but I ought to be audible.
You are audible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. And today I will be talking on Dalit literature matters. Let us begin with a sample of simple deductive reasoning that may serve as an algorithm for Dalit literature. Human lives matter. Dalits are human. Therefore, Dalit lives matter. And Dalit lives matter. The representation of Dalit lives in literature matters. On your screens now, you will see some data which indicates how this social formation is oppressed by society, the institutions of the state, and non-state actors in an independent democratic nation whose constitution mandates the protection of the fundamental rights of citizens. May I have the slide, please? Is the slide on?
Sir, we are. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Move on to the next one, please.
Next slide.
Okay. I want to just think before we proceed any further. Every 5 minutes, a crime is committed against a Dalit. 6 Dalit women are raped every day. The understated poverty rate in India is 21%. Among the lower caste, 81% of the STs, 66% of the SCs, and 58% of the OBCs live on the poverty line. 90% of sanitation workers are Dalits. 56,000 children living in slum areas die each year due to malnutrition. The next slide, please. Okay, on the next slide, could we have the next slide, please? Okay, not waste any time. Even if you don't see the next slide, it provides a case study data. 25-2020, Arvind Bansode, 32, highly educated social activist dies under mysterious circumstances. Case registered as suicide without proper investigation. 6th of June, 2020, Vikas Kumar Jatar, 17, shot dead by 4 upper caste men in Amroha, UP, ignored by mainstream media. Next, upper caste COVID patients in UP and Nainital refuse to eat food cooked by a Dalit cook. Next, M. Sudhakar, killed by father-in-law when he came to meet his upper caste wife of 6 months. Next, Dr. Payal Tadvi, 26, second-year PG student commits suicide after being harassed and tortured in Topiwala National Medical Hospital. This is in Maharashtra. So, what I'm trying to present through the case study is atrocities that have been committed really. Could we okay. I shall refer to to 3 articles of the Indian Constitution. Article 14 reads, the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Article 15(1) clearly mandates that the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. And Article 17 clearly states, untouchability is abolished in any form is forbidden. The enforcement of any disability right out of untouchability shall be an offense punishable in accordance with the law. Therefore, simply speaking, any discrimination authorized by social custom or religious belief is unconstitutional. The next slide, please. As a consequence, under the directive principles of state policy, Article 46 of the Constitution provides that the state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the society, and in particular of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and shall protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. Post-colonial studies attempt to challenge and dismantle forms of representations, reading practices, and values of colonialism, and create alternative models that reconfigure power structures to build egalitarian human communities. However, one area that needs special attention is what Carol Boyce Davis in Black Men Writing an Identity observes, I quote, feel within nations who have been colonized. As a post-colonial nation recasts itself, rejecting colonial representations with the hopes of an egalitarian future, there is growing awareness that everything is not utopian in the post-colonial state. Every power structure creates its margins, and certain segments of the population are relegated to the peripheries of the new structure. Nationalism that had been an ally in the anti-colonial resistance homogenizes an exclusionary discourse to the disadvantage of a new set of marginalized groups. During colonial rule, the indigene, pejoratively referred to as a native, was the subaltern. Post-coloniality created its own subalterns. These were the inferior castes, minority groups, women, and Dalits, others within the post-colonial state. Could we have the mics of men's mouth? Because there's a lot of audio disturbance. The French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, in his treatise on ethics, speaks of the tendency of Western philosophical tradition toward totalization, which subsumes the other within the matrix of the self. The alternative to this is a welcoming approach to the embodied other in the recognition and respect for the face of the other. I create Dalit lives and literature within ethical context. Could we have the next slide, please? The phenomena of caste and untouchability evolved over time as a result of conflicts over land, resources, and cultural practices between the Central Asian steppe pastoralists who arrived in India between roughly 2000 BC and 1500 BC, and the indigenous inhabitants in the city-states and the forests. These conflicts produced the Chaturvarna sociological configuration. The ancient Hindu text Dharmashastras in existence of four varnas or classes divided according to relations of production and occupations. Brahmins, the priests, the Kshatriyas, rulers and warriors, the Vaishyas, traders and merchants, and the Shudras, skilled or unskilled laborers doing menial work. This Varna was primarily a pyramidal class system. Later, these classes became closed formations, membership determined exclusively by Ambedkar studied the Vedic texts, rationally, systematically re-examining the foundational beliefs of the caste. In the Rig Veda, observes, he found the myth of origin explaining the genesis of caste, the Purushukta. This myth presents the birth of human society as proceeding from sacrificial dismemberment of the primordial man, Virat. Dear Arjun Damle says that Brahmins themselves were born from the mouth of Brahma, Kshatriyas from his shoulders, the Vaishyas from his thighs, and Shudras from his feet. The Brahmins were the supreme. Next came the Kshatriyas and so on. Theories such as this were put forth in the Rig Veda, which again claimed to be God. Subsequent restrictive stipulations coded Brahmins in the religious texts were implemented by the rulers. In this way, the institution of religion and that of the state relegated the Shudras into socio-cultural bondage, leading to untouchability. In order to gain greater efficacy of control, as affirms, they divide the weird system of mythology, the ordination of caste, and the crude and inhuman laws to which we can find no parallel among other nations. Through the dawn of the forerunners, Ambedkar rejected caste as a God-made system. Ambedkar theorized that the practice of untouchability began after a fierce struggle for dominance between the Brahmins and the Buddhists. The Brahmins are practicing untouchability against beef eaters after they themselves stopped animal sacrifice in order to win an ideological battle against the Buddhists. The Buddhists were preaching against yagnas, that is, the sacrifices specific of objectives. Thereby, winning over cultivators and traders, cattle were snatched away for ritual sacrifices, obviously without any payment. In order to regain the constituency of the farm and trading classes, the Brahmins not only gave up animal sacrifice, but once ahead of the Buddhists, banning cow slaughter and consumption of non-vegetarian food altogether.
Can't hear a word. Do something about it, or else we have to leave.
शंकर दत्त सर वो कह सकते हैं एक बार अपना, ताकि नेट जो है ना इनका बार बार ये हो रहा है, आवाज इनका एकदम क्लियर नहीं हो रहा
Audible?
Not at all audible, sir. We can't hear a word. I mean, what you have spoken, I could just.
I think Professor Shankar's internet is weak. The signal is weak, sir.
Okay,
The
let me.
signal
Now you are audible, sir.
Yes, now he is audible. Yes. Now you are audible, sir.
Okay. Up to what point could you figure out what I was saying? Did you get the illusion of the system? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Did you get the history of the caste system? Were people able to hear that?
You were defining Varnashram Dharma.
Yes.
Varna system.
I think you should start from the Constitution of India, the 3 articles that you stated.
Oh, yes.
Beyond that, nothing was audible.
Oh my God.
Sir, I would suggest that you turn off your video and only audio.
Okay, I'll try that as well. Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Okay, I'll quickly go through the constitutions. Could those be played out on the screen, please? I refer to 3 articles of the Indian Constitution, Article 14, 15, and 17. 14, obviously, relating to the state that shall not deny to any person equality before the law or equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Article 15 that states that the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And finally, Article 17 that talks about untouchability being abolished and its practice in any form being forbidden. Therefore, simply speaking, any discrimination authorized by social custom or religious belief is unconstitutional. Now, if you move on to the next slide, and if you can't get the slide, I was talking about, as a consequence, the directive principles of state policy, that is Article 46 of the Constitution, provides that the state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of society, and in particular of the tribes, and shall protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. And then I went on to talk about post-colonial studies that attempts to dismantle forms of representation, reading practices, and values of colonialism, and create alternative models that reconfigure power structures in an attempt to build egalitarian human communities. And, however, there is a problem which Carol Boyce Davis cites, and that is that we need to look at people within nations who have been colonized. As a post-colonial nation recasts itself, rejecting colonial representations with the hope of an egalitarian future, we realize that everything is not utopian in the post-colonial state. Because past structure leaves its margins, and certain segments of the population are relegated to the peripheries of the structure. Nationalism that has been allied the anti-colonial resistance that homogenizes into an exclusionary discourse to the disadvantage of the new set of marginalized groups. During colonial rule, the indigene, pejoratively referred to as a native, was a subaltern. Post-coloniality created its own subalterns. Inferior castes, minority groups, women, and Dalits became others within the new post-colonial nation state. I had also talked about Levinas, the French philosopher, who, when he talks about ethics, speaks of the tendency of Western philosophical tradition towards totalization, which subsumes the other within the matrix of the self. The alternative to this creation of otherness is a welcoming approach to the embodied other in the recognition and respect for the face of the other. And I said, I shall locate that lives and literature within this particular ethical context. Let's talk about how caste and untouchability as a result of conflicts over land, resources, and cultural practice.
क्या? बात करूं?
Please, technical support, please resolve the problems. We are not hearing proper voice. Voice is totally gone. Please, technical support, do this one.
Why don't you restart the meeting? Ask everyone to exit and then rejoin. It will take 5 minutes, but everybody will be connected.
Yeah.
And the voice would be better. That's the way it's done on Zoom. Just close the meeting, call a formal closure, and then rejoin in 5 minutes.
Okay.
How will that help?
Rejoin करें. So,
yes, Dr. Aslam, that is good idea. At times this works. If we rejoin, maybe the speaker gets his connectivity.
yeah, it's better. It's better.
Actually, there is a loop. It gets stuck in that, and there is some software edge. It's not yet perfect. So if you close, then as we restart the computer, just restart the meeting, everything will be fine. I think so. I'm not so sure, but that's the way out.
Yes, sir is now present. Sir, are you there? No, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, sir.
You can? Okay, good.
Yes,
There's
sir.
a lot of audio disturbance.
Actually, network is poor, sir.
Okay, if you're able to hear me, let's get started quickly because we're losing a lot of time. Am I audible now to all the attendees?
Yeah, you are.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Let us
Okay.
from the post-colonial state slide.
Oh my God. You want to start with
the post-colonial state?
Okay, please go on to slide 6 then. Yeah, okay. Now, if you see on the slide, we're looking at every power structure that actually creates its own margins, and how certain parts, certain segments of the population, they are relegated to the peripheries of this new structure. At one point of time during the anti-colonial resistance, nationalism had been an ally. And unfortunately, that homogenizes into an exclusionary discourse to the disadvantage of the new set of the new marginalized groups. During colonial rule, the indigene, that was pejoratively referred to as the native, that was a subaltern. Post-coloniality created its own subalterns, and these were the inferior castes, minority groups, women, and Dalits, who became others within the new post-colonial nation state. The French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, in his treatise on ethics, speaks of the tendency of the Western philosophical tradition towards totalization, which subsumes the other within the matrix of the self. The alternative to this is a welcoming approach to the embodied other. And it recognizes and respects the face of the other. And this is exactly where I intend to locate Dalits' lives and literature. It is within this particular ethical context that I wish to locate Dalits' lives and literature. Now, as we go on to the next slide, please, slide 7. And here you'll notice that the phenomena of caste and untouchability evolved over time as a result of conflict over the land, resources, and cultural practices between the Central Asian steppe pastoralists who arrived in India roughly between 2000 BCE and 1500 BCE, and the indigenous inhabitants of the city-states and the forests. These conflicts produced the Chaturvarn sociological configuration. The ancient Hindu texts, the Dharma Shastras, inform that the existence of the 4 varnas or classes were divided according to the relations of production and occupations. Now here the Brahmins were the priests, the Kshatriyas, the rulers and the warriors, the Vaishyas, who were the traders and merchants, and the Shudras, semi-skilled or unskilled laborers who did most of the menial work. This Varn Vyavastha was primarily a pyramidal class system. Later, these classes became enclosed formation where membership was determined exclusively by births. Balasaheb Ambedkar studied the Vedic texts, rationally and systematically re-examining the foundational beliefs of the caste system. Jaffrelot observes that in the Rig Veda, he found the myth of origin explaining the genesis of caste. And this was the Purush Shukt. This myth presents the birth of human society as proceeding from the sacrificial dismemberment of the primordial man, the Virat Purush. The key idea, Arjun Dangle says, is that the Brahmins themselves were born from the mouth of Brahma, the Kshatriyas from his shoulders, the Vaishyas from his thighs, and the Shudras from his feet. Hence, the Brahmins were the most superior, next came the Kshatriyas, and so on. Theories such as this were put forth in the Rig Veda, which again claimed to be God-made. Subsequent restrictive stipulations coded by the Brahmins in the religious texts were implemented by the rulers. In this way, the institution of religion and that of the state relegated the Shudras into socio-cultural bondage, leading to untouchability. Poulos talks about the fact that, how they tried to gain greater efficacy of control. And they did it by devising a weird system of mythology, the ordination of caste and the crude and inhuman laws to which we can find no parallel among other nations. Through the doctrine of the four Varnas, Ambedkar rejected caste as a God-made system. He theorized that the practice of untouchability began after a fierce struggle for dominance between the Brahmins and the Buddhists. The Brahmins started practicing untouchability against beef eaters after they themselves stopped animal sacrifice in order to win an ideological battle against the Buddhists. The Buddhists were practicing against yagnas. Now, the yagnas were the ritual sacrifices for specific objectives, thereby winning over cultivators and traders whose cattle were snatched away for ritual sacrifices and obviously without payment. In order to regain the constituency of the farming and the trading classes, the Brahmins not only gave up animal sacrifice, but advanced a step ahead of the Buddhists by banning cow slaughter and consumption of non-vegetarian food altogether. Dalit subalternity is therefore not located in the colonial structure with the colonizer-colonized formation, but in the caste-based social, cultural, economic, and mental structure of the Brahmanical social order within Hindu society. It is characterized by rigid codes of spatial segregation, making Dalits the upper caste Hindus other. Dalit subalternity is more insidiously inhuman than racial discrimination, because while race is never legitimized by legislations of civil society or religious prescription, caste is legitimated through religious sanction, social mandate, and performativity of social and cultural practices. Next slide, please, if you can show it. Words matter. The power of the human signifying system that includes words, images, symbols can never be overstated. Words construct narratives that are built on discourses that shape the world we inhabit. The influential discourses consolidate and perpetuate the power of the dominant classes and castes. It is through such discourses that inequalities are normalized and naturalized, performing and re-performing such perspective as common sense. Dayapawar gained recognition for his autobiographical novel Balut, which was written in 1978. It was a story told by a persona, Dagdu Pawar, to the second persona, a more lettered Dayapawar. The novel recounts the experiences of an untouchable struggling for a peaceful existence, mentally tormented, but incapable of retaliation in word and deed. Many autobiographical books talking about oppressive realities were written after Balut. Pawar's use of language is not merely that of resistance, but that of an introspecting, analytical intellectual. For instance, Dayapawar deals with the idea of how language shapes society through naming and shaming. And I quote, the Manusmriti had a list of names for Shudras. It requires that our names should reflect a society's contempt for us. Brahmins' names signify learnedness, such as Vidyadhar, for instance. Kshatriya's names suggest valor, like Balram. Vaishya's names, they are named after the goddess of wealth, say Lakshmikant. And Shudras, for us, names like Shudrak or Matang, names that declare our low caste status. That was the order of things for centuries. Now, similarly, significations of dress codes have been markers of otherness, resulting in allocation of subordination in the social hierarchy. Chandrabhan Prasad cites the example of Mahatma Ayankali in Kerala, who had led a revolt in 1893 for self-esteem arising from dress codes. He dressed like a Nair from toe to neck with a white pagadi because it was socially mandated that Dalit men wear a konakam, a North Indian version of loincloth. Dalit women incurred the wrath of the upper castes if they wore ravikai, sari blouse, and jewelry. And so too with food. It is this that introduced the debate between Angresiyat and Hindiyat. What was seen to be liberative in Angresiyat were literatures, sciences, machines, and food, and dress code democracy. Macaulay, the whipping boy of post-colonial scholarship, and his peon could wear trousers or shorts, but Hindiyat in the public sphere upheld the graded inequality of dress oligarchy. However, words and non-verbal signifiers can create counter discourses that resist and challenge the dominant. Dalit narratives are therefore a literature of resistance against inequality and injustices prevalent in Hindu society. Now, born in Danapur in Bihar, Hira Dom's poem, Achut Ki Shikayat, the complaint of an untouchable, published in 1914, is evocative of silent, indeterminate suffering. The opening stanza, translated into English, reads, English from Bhojpuri reads, "Night and day we suffer. We share our grief with the Sahib. Gods are deaf to our sorrows. How long we shall suffer is not known." I'm afraid I'm not a native speaker of Bhojpuri, but having lived all my life in Bihar, I've been used to the vocabulary, the rhythm, and the cadences of the language. So if you find some, some anomalies with the translation, you'll probably forgive me. In the 1960s, themes of working class issues were taken up by a poet, Narayan Surve. The Little Magazine movement established itself during this period. The stories of Baburao Bagul, anthologized in When I Had Concealed My Caste, were a landmark publication in Marathi literature. Arjun Dangle states that critics had hailed it, and I quote, "the epic of the Dalits," while comparing it to jazz music of the blacks. Bagul's stories taught Dalit writers to give creative shape to their experiences and feelings. In 1972, a group of Marathi writer activists such as Namdev Dhasal, Arjun Dangle, among others, founded a political organization called Dalit Panthers, paralleling the Black Panthers who had militantly struggled for civil rights of the African Americans in the United States of America. The word Dalit, evolving from the word Dalan, meaning broken or defeated, was probably first used by Jyotirao Phule. However, Lakshmi Holstrom, who has translated Bama's Sangati from Tamil to English, contends that Dalit was first used by Ambedkar, in preference to his own earlier usage of the nomenclature scheduled castes. However, the usage gained currency with the founding of Dalit Panthers in 1972. Dalit writings by Dalit writers have a resilient motivation for agency, not to accept silently, but to give voice to resistance and challenge the oppressive dominant discourses. In Shankar Rao Kharat's short story, A Corpse in the Well, a customary duty for mahars to retrieve an abandoned dead body from a village well is narrated. The corpse is guarded throughout the night, but the head constable and the village headman, they grow in impatience because they want the body to be removed forthwith without waiting for their heirs to arrive. When the narrator's Anna is abused by the head constable, the narrator questions the injustice being done to his father. He had not done anything wrong. His only crime was being a mahar of the village. When Anna eventually does attempt to retrieve the bloated corpse, the risk of descending into the well is imperiled by the presence of a snake, and the upper caste's inhumanity and indifference to the hazardous task is recorded. And I quote, "A storm of thoughts spread through my head about the dangerous, deadly work involved in the village duty," close quotes. Dalit autobiographies as a mode of writing is valued, as Prabha Mukherjee says, of authentic experience. And Daya Pawar Balut says, these are words that seem to come from the gut. In order to provide, Valmiki says, inspiration to our future generations. Dalit women writers are represented in Arjun Dangle's edited Poisoned Bread, an anthology of modern Marathi Dalit writers, by Shantabai Kamble's Naja Goes to School and Doesn't, and Kumud Pavde's inspirational story, The Story of My Sanskrit. The first is the story of the discontinuation of school education on account of distance and expense. They knew nobody in Pandharpur, and there was no money to study in Pandharpur. And the girls' helpless sorrow that you have to stop school halfway. In Kumud Pavde's narrative, her barbs, these mahars have really got above themselves. With academic mobility, in spite of numerous hurdles, she gains confidence and finally gets an assistant lectureship at a government college. Her appointment is ironically credited to her altered marital surname through an intercaste marriage. The caste of a maiden status designated by her maiden name, Kumud Somkumar, remains deprived. Baby Thai Kamble's The Prisons We Broke, which is known as Jina Amocha, offers glimpses of resistance as she implacably confronts a reprehensible social order that has flogged us with whip of pollution, she writes, mandated by a religion she terms selfish and worthless. Triply marginalized on grounds of caste, gender, and poverty, Baby Kamble's resistance emerges from a life marked by helplessness, lack of options, subject to slavery. The discriminatory caste pyramid, which naturalized the inferiorization of the mahars, reduced them to levels of harnessed cattle used to plow fields. And I quote, "Just as the farmer pierces the bullock's nose and inserts a string through the nostrils to control it, you have pierced the mahar nose with a string of ignorance." It is an important liberatory voice of one denied social inclusion. The issues of intra-community gender oppression and injustices experienced by Kamble are scripted with rare conviction by Bama in Sangati. This Tamil narrative is scripted with the enduring hope that self-confidence and self-respect, despite adversities that are often affiliated with the church as an ideological apparatus, will enable women to live with, as she says, vitality, truth, and enjoyment. The dispossessed must necessarily be architects of their own change. And she writes, if we ourselves do not change our condition, then who will come and change it for us? It has often been asserted that scripting of Dalit representation by non-Dalits lacks a visceral impact, as Mukherjee says. The nature of their literature consists in a rebellion against the suppression and humiliation suffered by Dalits in the past, even in the present, in the framework of the Varna system, writes Mukti Bodh. Given this sociological matrix, the creative sensibility deeply concerns a Dalit perspective, and that an outstanding work of Dalit literature would be born only when Dalit life would present itself from a Dalit point of view. When critiquing Dalit subalternity and Dalit representation in literature, there is, of course, an eminent danger of falling into twin traps. One is to consider the non-Dalit category as a homogeneous entity, one that is complicit with the Brahmanical social order, which obviously it is not. And two, the possibility of limiting the signification of the word Dalit and to consider that category as a monolith. Dalit literature gains legitimacy in forging voices as a declaration of freedom and agency of liberation from discriminatory practices of caste, gender, race, religion, and ethnicity. There has been an ongoing debate on the value of Dalit literature as lived experience, the experience of a consciousness based on ideas of equality, liberty, justice, and solidarity, rather than pleasure. It is possible, or is it, I ask, possible to analyze such works within the framework of traditional aesthetics? D.R. Nagaraj, one of India's finest cultural critics, believed that literary criticism is ultimately a critique of the world as well as art, and both forms of critique should start from the same plane. He sought to bring back social into literary culture and argued that Dalit writing needed a new literary criteria for evaluation. Dalit literature emerges from a cultural critique of the comfort, respectability, and propriety of upper caste, upper class patriarchal nationhood. It is a powerful counterpoint to the erasure of a social formation in historical and political discourse in India. Being subversive in content and form, Dalit literature challenges both content and form of received literary norms. The language of poverty, deprivation, quotidian struggle, and slum life cannot approximate the refined language of privileged. And conversely, the language of refinement in privileged life cannot authentically represent the struggles of Dalit life. The vulgarity in language is an authentic, visceral expression of lived experience of the dispossessed. It shocks and it makes advantaged readers feel uncomfortable, challenging them to accept their complicity in the structures of oppression. Can we have the next slide, please? It is important to understand primarily two strands of cultural politics of the depressed classes in the years leading to Indian independence in order to follow the trajectory of Dalit cultural production. Ambedkar's politics was conspicuously different from the Gandhian ideological and cultural politics that was dominant till independence. The subsequent Dalit movement, Nagaraj says, was a product of the mental state that believed in the firm rejection of the Gandhian model of tackling the problems of untouchables, and that has shaped the contours of its themes and patterns. The Gandhian view of the issue of untouchability was basically religious and spiritual before his encounter with Ambedkar. As a result, he believed in the liberation from untouchability through penance and acts of social service by caste Hindus, as opposed to mandated changes in the law. Ambedkar used the language of rights and legislated remedies. Gandhi replaced the term untouchable with Harijan in 1932 which was later adopted by the government of India, political leaders, and the media. Dalits, on the other hand, found it patronizing and infantilizing. On the issue of separate electorates intended for grant by the colonial government, Gandhi went on a fast unto death, and Ambedkar, under duress, withdrew his demand and signed the Pune Pact in 1932. While Gandhi viewed the caste system as purely a religious question, an internal one for Hindu society, the Dalit perspective considered it a threat with its irremediable stigma of inferiority, humiliation, and insult. Nagaraj again brilliantly interprets that both Ambedkar and Gandhi were transformed by their encounter, although, as Ramchandra Guha says, the chain of influence was not admitted to by either party. Balasaheb accepted the primacy of religion in matters of untouchability. The 1935 Yola Declaration of Ambedkar that he would not die a Hindu was a recognition of the legitimacy of the Gandhian mode, although rejecting the choice in which the solution was sought. He embraced Buddhism on the 14th of October 1956 with millions of his supporters just 3 months before he died. On the other hand, Gandhi, in the Harijan issue of November 16, 1935, declared the caste system had to be eradicated, much to the discomfiture of his orthodox followers. He also critiqued the restrictions on interdining and intercaste marriage that marked a change from his earlier uncertainty on these issues. One is tempted, at the risk of inaccuracies, to theorize that Dalit literature written by non-Dalits and those written by Dalits follows this antipodal historiography. But for Dalit literature to grow and develop as an collective ethic is likely to witness the transformation of both. May I have the next slide, please? Meena Kandaswamy's 2014 novel, The Gypsy Goddess, amalgamates the demands of narrative aesthetics and social content in Dalit writing. It is based on the real events of the Kilvenmani massacre on Christmas Day in 1968 in the Tanjore district of Tamil Nadu, when 44 men, women, and children were burnt to death for participating in a protest for improved wages, justice, and human rights. It is a self-reflexive, looping narrative, combining the myth of insurrection, meticulous documentation, multiple narrative voices in a ferocious indictment of individual, institutional, and state privilege and power that dehumanizes and annihilates the Dalits and the marginalized castes. The charred bodies of the devastated forms a fierce critique of the inequities of social formation that are often upheld as divinely ordained. Two textual representations of Dalit by non-Dalit women writers will throw light on representation and representability of Dalit experience by those outside the social formation, but are able to imaginatively, intellectually, and with egalitarian compassion present these. Velutha in Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things and Shanta Rameshwar Rao's Kittu in Children of God. In Roy's internationally popular Booker Prize-winning novel, the complicity and hypocrisy of the adult world combines with the brutality and moral perversion of the caste system. In Children of God, Lakshmi, a Dalit woman, narrates the story of the killing of Kittu, who goes into the temple to see the idol of which he had heard of and wanted to worship before it. Being an untouchable who had violated the sanctity of the sacred space, he is subjected to inhuman brutality of violence and set on fire, resulting in his death. The family breaks up as they try to shed the shackles of caste bondage, and Lakshmi realizes that for countless despised children of God, there is no freedom from the imprisonment of custom. The naturalistically grim novel Rohington Mysteries, A Fine Balance, chronicles a decade in India between the imposition of internal emergency by Indira Gandhi in 1975 to her assassination in Orwell's apocalyptic year 1984. The third chapter, entitled A Village by a River, narrates the misfortunes and inhumanities of Dalit life, and I quote, "The chamars skinned the carcasses, ate the meat, tanned the hide. Dukhi learned to appreciate how dead animals provided his family's livelihood. His skin became impregnated with a color, with the odor that was part of the leather worker's stink that would not depart even after he had washed and scrubbed in all the cleansing river." The narrative delineates sexual violation of Rupa, Dukhi's wife, a common feature of gender exploitation that occurs with regularity. Hence, Sharan Kumar Limbale in The Bastard writes, "Those who have been given power by religion on account of their high caste and money inherited from ancestors have deemed it their birthright to abuse Dalit honor." In Untouchable, which is a very commonly read text, Anand attempts some degree of peripheral glorification, describing the protagonist Baka, and I quote, "bit superior for his job," and that he looked intelligent, sensitive, with a sort of dignity that does not belong to an ordinary scavenger who is, as a rule, uncouth and unclean. It gave him a nobility strangely in contrast with his filthy profession. Would a Dalit writer have scripted Dalit experience similarly? I doubt it. It seems a Gandhian Dalit narrative where Dalit identity, and I talk about an earlier Gandhi Dalit narrative, where Dalit identity is a marker that one needs to ascend from. In other words, the solution is not based on the annihilation of caste, rather a transformation through moral regeneration within existing sociological structures. The question is, does Anand consider the subjective sovereignty of Baka, and does he or can he articulate the cultural nuances of lived experience along with the anxieties and silence? This, however, does not take away from Anand's effort at creating significant space, even nascent resistance, for the articulation of inequality and desired liberation that is urged. The work of Manoranjan Vyapari, particularly in his autobiography, Interrogating My Chandal Life, enables readers to view him as a veritable everyman. The mythical figure subject to the mechanics of the caste system, the state and non-state actors of political duplicity, violence, gender oppression, and human indignity. An infant refugee from erstwhile East Pakistan, he was proclaimed dead for 12 hours at the Shiromanipur refugee camp in Bankura district. Vyapari worked as a porter, a domestic help brutalized sexually by a policeman, a picaro, a street youth implicated in gang fights, a rickshaw puller, a construction site worker, and also someone who was incarcerated for being in conflict with the law. In prison, with the help of a teacher, he learned the Bangla alphabet in his 20s, learning to write with twigs on bare earth. A chance with Mahashweta Devi, a passenger on his rickshaw, turned him into a writer. He happened to ask Mahashweta Devi the meaning of Jibisha, meaning the will to live, from the author's book, Agni Garbha. Vyapari was also a Naxal apologist, a family man who named his firstborn Mahashweta, and for a time the disciple of Shankar Guha Yogi. It is in this section that Vyapari transcends the subjective individual narrative to speak of collective resistance. And I quote, "The multitude of people, the sky, the wind, a dream that had mingled with the future and the struggles of the laboring masses, to become an inspiration that had seeped into the soil and water of Chhattisgarh." In the 12th century, Karnataka witnessed an anti-caste social reform movement founded by Saint Basavanna that changed all existing parameters of social transformation. Not only did this movement break caste and gender barriers, but it also contributed immensely to Kannada literature because reform in thought and practice was brought about through poems, songs, and music. This movement is categorized as a part of a larger trend of mukti movements in medieval South Asia. As Gita Hariharan in times of siege, Basavanna or Basava is a part of a history lesson that invited the wrath of the Hindu militant orthodoxy in culture and in the academia. The treasurer of the 12th century city of Kalyan was a man called Basava. He was no ordinary finance minister, but a person endowed with rare intellectual passion to question everything that was traditional. He drew around him a rare congregation of mystics and social revolutionaries. Together, they sought to build an inclusive community that included women and the lowest polluting castes. And I quote, poets, potters, reformers, washermen, philosophers, prostitutes, learned Brahmins, housewives, tanners, ferrymen. All were a part of the brief burst of Kalyan's glory. All were equal in that they were Veer Shaivas, warriors of Shiva. Together they made poetry, poetry that chased prose, that searched for many faces of truth. There are two significant points made here. One is the use of the dialogic imagination that offers space for multiple voices to coexist in Basava's search for the many faces of truth. And two, constructing the incongruous catalog. Now you remember the catalog. Poets, potters, reformers, washermen, philosophers, prostitutes, learned Brahmins, housewives, tanners, ferrymen. So this incongruous catalog from women to ferrymen is a masterly stylistic maneuver in which stylistic equivalence implies a non-hierarchic social equivalence. In other words, in a list of this kind, there is spatial parity for the philosopher and the prostitute as much as a learned Brahmin and tanners. This arboreal hierarchic order has, as Deleuze and Guattari would state, been altered structurally to conceive a rhizome or a horizontal one. Further in the narrative, we are told that Basava and his many followers challenged the caste system, the iron neck that held society so firmly in place that reduced common men and women to hopeless captives. Basava's egalitarian dream became a swelling movement. The makers of mirrors, skinners of dead animals, the bearers of children, and it threatened to swallow social conventions and religious ritual, the staple diet of tradition. The culmination of the Basava narrative is an intercaste marriage between a Brahmin girl and a cobbler groom, which was condemned and the respective fathers of the couple tortured to death. Violent retaliation by Basava's followers, it happened despite his plea for non-violence, which resulted in the destruction of the city. Basava's legacy, inflammable to traditionalists and a model for equality and democracy, is a significant metaphor that acquires significance in literature of liberation. For literature to be an engine for social change, it is necessary that Dalit agency is represented in literature, scripting the oppressed as subjects rather than objects of inequality and injustice. Sharing experience of trauma, humiliation, inequality, submission, rebellion, and the hope to be able to voice these emotions as social experience is carried through by Dalit writing. Such writing does not glorify victimhood. It enables agency for subaltern resistance. There is need, as Arundhati Roy proclaims in a foreword to My Seditious Heart, the need for, and I quote, algorithms that show us to snatch the scepters from our slow, stupid, maddened kings, close quotes. In doing so, this form of writing transcends the seeking of compassion to being literature of resistance and liberation. Yet a note of Spivakian caution needs to be introduced. It is imperative that the individual right to authentic experience, identity and reality are respected without the appropriation of alternative history. In the politics of inclusion and the formation of an inclusive alliance of the dispossessed that became the hallmark of Nagaraj's social and literary criticism lies the future of Dalit representations in literature. The future must include Dalit writings within university courses because the political, intellectual, the moral, and the creative must be fellow travelers in the quest of equity and justice, which is the objective of the development of knowledge. May I have the next slide, please? This is where I'm going to conclude with lines that have been my favorites for a long time. And this is from Bama's Sangati. I have to struggle hard because I'm a woman. And exactly like that, my people are punished constantly for the simple fact of having been born Dalits. Is it our fault that we are Dalits? On top of that, just because I'm a woman, I have to battle especially hard. The injustices, violence, and inequalities will come to an end. And finally, she closes that novel with, I hope that such a time quoting Aga Shahid Ali's line, mad heart, be brave. This is where I end. I would like to thank the Vice Chancellor, Veer Singh University, Professor Devi Prasad Tiwari, the Principal, Jagjiwan College, Ara, Professor Jawahar Lal, very specially the convener, Dr. Aslam Parvez, for having put this webinar together and to have invited some wonderful speakers. I'm very eager to hear. The joint conveners, Dr. Nabarun Ghosh and Ms. Bharti Rai, invited speakers, faculty, researchers, students, and attendees. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful lecture and giving your precious time. I would like to have a couple of questions here. First question, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Priyanka asks, can we consider work of non-Dalit writer about Dalits as Dalit literature? How can it be explained in terms of their writing style and aesthetics? Let me repeat. Can we?
No, it's all right. I've heard it. Thank you so much. And it's a very interesting question, which I actually tried to answer during the course of my talk itself, because again, it depends largely on, let's say, what I started out with. If you remember, I started out with the notion of what Levinas has to say. And what he says is that there is a tendency, whenever there is any kind of a knowledge formation, there is the tendency towards totalization. And that totalization leads to the creation of otherness. And the alternative to that is a welcoming approach which recognizes and respects the other. And to what extent, and here I'd like to use a particular phrase which has commonly been used by Harsh Mandar, and he doesn't like this particular word empathy, but what he talks about is the compassion for the other. And of course, it is very, very true that as far as Dalit literature is concerned, the visceral impact that Arun Prabha Mukherjee talks about in her introduction to Sharan Kumar Limbale's Dalit Aesthetics that it lacks the visceral impact. The non-Dalit representation lacks the visceral impact because it is not a part of lived experience. And the authenticity of lived experience can only be expressed, can be represented by somebody who has actually been through that kind of an experience. But then again, I do believe that there have been many people, many excellent writers, and I've cited some of these during the course of my talk, who have been able to actually very compassionately embrace the other. And embracing the other, maybe they have not used the kind of language that is so powerful, but there are people like Arundhati Roy, for example, who has been able to use the language of poetry, a complex form. Or for that matter, Shanta Rameshwar Rao has used powerful language, who is a non-Dalit writer. So as long as there's the authenticity of experience that is conveyed, I think there should be some kind of a space, because you don't close in spaces. Again, that would that again would lead to another set of binaries altogether, and that is not really desirable. And that is precisely why Nagaraj, for example, takes this talks about this inclusive alliance of the dispossessed, which is so central to representations in literature. So again, yes, this has been an ongoing debate, and this debate is not going to end either. But I do believe that there should be space for every kind of expression, therefore every kind of representation, and there should be absolutely no entry signs for people. I hope I've answered that question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. There is another interesting question by Samuel Azim. Don't the people like Pehlu Khan belong to Dalit? What is your take on this? This is my,
I didn't get that.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
Okay. Question from Samuel Azim. Don't the people like Pehlu Khan belong to Dalit? What is your take on this?
See, that is precisely what we've been talking about. And this is something very interesting that Spivak talks about as well. She wishes to enlarge on the one hand because she wants to provide the kind of flexibility using the word subaltern. So I think all the disenfranchised, dispossessed groups that have been exploited or are facing a great deal of, let us say, a great deal of predatory threats by the state and non-state actors, it is absolutely essential that a solidarity be formed, because it is only through the formation of public solidarity and the inclusion of multiple groups, because Dalit, if you go back to the term from which has been drawn, namely Dalan, the battered, the oppressed. So I think an inclusive approach would probably be far, would be far more enlarging for Dalit literature itself. Again, without, and that is a very, very cautious, shall we say, footnote that needs to be added, without approximation of the Dalit culture.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Last question, sir. And this is a
Okay.
question from Badigar or Badigar. She has asked question, or he has asked question. My question is, Basava philosophy a new religious ideology? Or does it hopes to bring in change in the Hindu religion, which pillared on the caste system?
Well, when we are locating it within the context of Dalits, quite obviously, as I have tried to indicate, is the fact that it exists within the pyramidal caste system in Hinduism. But yes, it's very, very important to extend that metaphor to all forms of exploitation and all forms of discrimination that happens. Because as I said, that in order to fight discrimination, and discrimination where you have a situation that evolves where there is religion and the state, they come together, you need a very powerful voice, a solidarity that emerges. And this whole idea of the Basava story of 12th century Karnataka can be used very successfully as grounds of developing a metaphor for this solidarity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your insightful lectures, sir. Now,
well, thank you very much for having me. It was really an honor.
Thank you, sir. It's my honor too. Thank you. Okay, now I will take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Prabhakar Palaka as a participating speaker. Palaka sir, are you there? Turn on your microphone, sir.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Sir,
thank you, Aslam, sir.
Yes, I will read your bio note. Prabhakar Palaka has been teaching English in Swami Shraddhanand College, University of Delhi since 2002. He has done all of his higher education, including PhD, from Center for English Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. His areas of interest include Dalit literature, Uriya Dalit literature, Odia literature, Indian literature, post-colonial literature, cultural studies, autobiography, Dalit autobiography, etc. His books entitled Politics of Writing, a Study of Dalits in Odia Literature was published by Authors Press in 2015. Edited book titled Reading the Margins, 2020. He has several research articles published in reputed research journals. He has organized both national and international seminars on the issue of marginalities. He has also participated and presented papers in various national and international seminars, including presenting paper in Oxford University Press or Oxford University in 2018. Prabhakar Palaka is also creative writer. Some of his creative writings have been accepted for an Oxford University Press book project titled Dalit Writings from Eastern Regions, which is under process. With these words, now I request Dr. Plaka sir to kindly take take your session and share your valuable experience because you are expert of this field. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Aslam Saab, for having me in the webinar. We didn't know each other, but we have a common friend and who connected both of us. And it was such a thrilling experience to listen to Professor Shankar Dutt. And after having listened to such an exhaustive talk, beginning from the origin of caste to the complications of caste in the modern literature, Indian literature, then emergence of Dalit literature, then going further up to covering the entire canvas of post-colonial literature. Hardly anything he has left for me to talk. Yeah, that was, yes, that was really a wide range talk. And thank you, Professor Shankar. I really learned a lot listening to you, and it was really great. And thank you also the organizing committee. And I must congratulate the principal and the Vice Chancellor, Kunwar Singh University, for organizing such a wonderful webinar. Having said that, I have titled my talk as Quest for Equality in Dalit Literature. Yeah, that's the rubric of your webinar, Quest for Equality in Unequal India. So my paper would be narrowed down to Quest for Equality in Dalit Literature. Okay, so I wouldn't be repeating the things that Professor Shankar Dutt has already spoken very illustratively. First thing that comes to my mind, he began his talk saying Dalit life matters. Well, that has become already a buzzword ever since George Floyd's incident that happened and Black Life Matters. And after that, it has come to India as well, and Dalit life matters. But does it really, is it really true? Dalit life matters in India. See, does it matter? Does Dalit life matter? I think that is a question that we need to ask. And when we are talking about quest for equality, that itself, I think, opens up layers of inequality in the society, and the society is grappling with. And if not everybody can be Nirbhaya, not everybody can be even Sushant, of course, a lot of our sentiments are attached with them. And I hope and imagine that every life can be venerated or supported, just like Nirbhaya and Sushant. As I think Professor Shankar Dutt also rightly while he was providing the statistics, every 6 hours, every day I think around 6 women, every hour around 6 women are raped. So, and who is just recently in the UP, one Dalit girl, young Dalit girl, and who was so excited that she has passed her 12th and was dreaming of her higher education, and she was brutally raped and murdered. How many people speak for her, and she was a Dalit girl. And I can go on, and I think Professor Shankar Dutt has already raised several issues. So, and I think basically India believes in inequality, India believes in inequality and lives in inequality. And the philosophy of a caste system lies in the philosophy of exclusion. You are safe as much as you exclude the others. And I just draw the idea of J.S. Mill, of course, in his essay on subjection of women. And he says that how can you see the progress of the nation by excluding the 50% of the population? When he talks about 50% of population, he's actually talking about women. And rightly so, if we go by Dalit Panthers movement and their definition of a Dalit, okay, and it is even talking about, as Professor Shankar Dutt also rightly said, that the alliance of the dispossessed. Okay, he I think in that manifesto, Dalit Panther manifesto, they have included the women as well, of course, the ex-untouchables, the tribes, and the women, of course, the Shudra, of course, they are there, and various other marginalized communities, including the minorities. Okay, so, and so equality is just, and I think utopia, definitely. And can we see, how can we see, and all these dispossessed communities that I talked about constitute the majority of this nation, constitute, even if we go by the narrowed definition of Dalit, let's say SCs and STs, and then you include the OBCs also, almost half. So every second person is a Dalit. So how can the nation progress? By, by believing in this philosophy of exclusion. Okay. So how can we quest for equality unless and until this country acknowledges that a greater section of the society had been, subjugated, had been terrorized, had been victimized, socially, economically, culturally, and we have to begin from there. There are different, and the only merit that our country believes in is birth, So as already I think Professor Shankar Dutt also has rightly mentioned, that it is if you are born a Brahmin, you are automatically meritorious, I think we have listened to lots of stories of Ambedkar himself, how meritorious he was, and everybody, knows it. But what he had to go through in his life, that too is known to all of us, So even when he became the principal of a college, the peon who was a Brahmin wouldn't give him a glass of water, So that's the way. It's not just, again, I think when principal was talking about in his introductory remarks, he was talking about the unequal distribution of wealth. Well, that is just one small part. When we listen to Professor Vivek Kumar, eminent sociologist in Jawaharlal Nehru University, what he says is the social exclusion leads to multiple deprivation. If a person is socially excluded, he is also, economically, culturally, and in many spheres of exclusion one has to undergo. So therefore, it's the center. That's why, so caste system emanates, deeply from the root of Hindu religion. Okay, so I think Manusmriti has done the spoiler. okay, and all other, what to say, dharma shastras. So talking about caste as a divine origin, okay, it's God who has, given birth to all the human beings into different human beings, the Indians into different, caste. So that's where whether I would just read. The caste is a very strong reality. So, Untouchable Spring by Kalyan Rao, what he talks about caste in his Untouchable Spring. Let me just read. In this country, the air that one breathes has caste. The water one drinks has caste. The field canal that flows and the land that yields harvest have caste. The school, the temple, and the village square have caste. The food one eats, the house one lives in, and the clothes one wears have caste. The word one speaks has caste. Literature and culture have caste. The state has caste. Its laws have caste. Justice and the courts have caste. Justice and the courts have caste. I do not know how many of you know this fact, that just in front of the Rajasthan High Court, you would find the statue of Manu, and we are talking about judiciary, we are talking about justice, justice system or judiciary system to be impartial, and the same court, promotes the installation of a statue, and who had been a villain in creating the caste system and codifying it. Okay, so justice and the courts have caste, and the corpse, yes, and the cemetery have caste. God has caste, devil has caste. Look at that. So what does not have caste in India, or what does not believe in caste? However good things one can talk and sit and discuss, but every one, in their subconscious mind, believes in this hard reality that is caste. Okay, so I think so. And when people, it's not just people believe in caste, but also look at what Althusser, what Althusser talks about state apparatus, and how the people, the party which is in power uses the state apparatus, or let's say various institutions, including education, including, let's say, schools and colleges and universities, to promulgate one particular ideas as the universal. So therefore, it is the center, it is the center which coins, which originates margin and also sustains the margin. In the words of Gramsci, that is how you homogenize, homogenize one particular idea as the universal, and you try to coerce or through their willingness or through the coerce, you subjugate others. So, however, the fight. Yeah. So when we talk about inequality, it is not just unequal distribution, but social caste. Caste is a huge social capital, So if you are, which means again, the knowledge, the knowledge and the productive knowledge or the culture of Dalit have always been demonized in this country, or or the culinary habits of Dalits have been demonized in this country. So the culture of Dalit was never considered as culture. The knowledge, the knowledge production of Dalit was never considered a knowledge at all. That's what, if you read Kanchailaya's post-Hindu, post-Hindu, or even, Cracked Mirror by Gopal Guru, one would get to understand all these things. Whereas if you read Kanchailaya's book, Post-Hindu, or the, turning the pot and tilling the land, one would come to know what a powerful knowledge world was, possessed by these so-called marginalized communities, but they were never considered to be. The way they tan skin, the way they made shoes, the way they till the land, those were never in the world of, epistemological world. Now, when we come to, but we all understand that the fight against caste was not just something all of a sudden it began. It is as old as caste system. I think we can trace back to Buddhism, Buddhism and who fought against the Brahminical ideology or Brahminism. And thereafter, I think, thereafter another very strong phase was in, I think, Bhakti movement. Then we come to 19th century with Phule and Periyar, and in 20th century, of course, it was greatly popularized by Ambedkar. And then in 1970s, Dalit Panther movement, so it began as a great, Dalit movement, and that is where the literature was produced, and which was known as, Dalit literature. By the way, Dalit, does not at all talk about a caste. So Dalit is actually it is talking about a condition, a miserable condition to which a particular segment of the society, or to which a particular, let's say, segment of population has been, let's say, victimized or marginalized. So otherwise, this is a condition. Therefore, today one may be Dalit, but tomorrow his condition might change. So whether I think that the debate, I don't want to go to that debate. Definitely, I think everyone is free to write. Arundhati Roy is also free to write, and Mulkraj Anand also was free to write on Dalits. But definitely, so there has always been a debate, but we need, there has to be a collective voice in order to, annihilate the caste system. But there is always a dilemma, just the dilemma one could see in between Ambedkar and Gandhi. The same dilemma surfaces time and again among the Dalit intellectuals and the intellectuals belonging to the upper caste. So one is trying to annihilate the caste system itself. Okay, they are resisting against all exploitation, but their aim is to see a casteless society. Whereas when the writers belonging to the upper strata of the society writing on Dalits, definitely somewhere trying to include, maybe trying to create a space, space for the Dalits, but we cannot say whether in equal footing, whether to see them as equal in equal status. So I think one time Professor Kanchailaya was saying in one of the interviews that some people told him that now you have earned enough money and you have become professor, and so just keep quiet, and why are you writing against the Hindutva and so on. And what Professor Kanchalaya was saying is, you make me the priest of Tirupati, then I will leave this professorship. You make me, can you make me the priest of Tirupati? See, very interestingly, when he writes why I'm not a Hindu, then there is another version, coming up, why I am a Hindu. So with that kind of counter, arguments, I do not think even we are able to, or even we are on a platform where we understand caste has really deteriorated our nation. And as long as caste is there, untouchability will be there. As long as caste is there, discriminations, multi-layered discriminations will be there. And therefore, that hampers the progress of the nation. I think it is also important to talk about, reservation system. It is true when I think Professor Shankar Dutt also was pointing out where the scavenging job, almost all the group 4 posts you would see 100% filled up, whether it is just a sweeper in MCD and all these things, or T-boy or this, or office attendant, and these jobs are all vacancies are filled up. Okay, but as you go into the upper layer in group 2 and group 1, you'd see how many professors would be there even in Patna University, belonging to the SC and ST and OBCs. Okay, so it's very, very hard. So even in Delhi University, just 1, 2, or maximum 3% of the posts have been filled up, So, and who are in the administration, and why are they not letting them, in? So there is a kind of strategy, again, the same, believing not in the Constitution. I don't think a Constitution, of course, we have wonderful principles in the country, in the Constitution earmarked, but I don't think that is what is working, Again, still our minds are operating, our administration also operating, considering Manusmriti as the Constitution. So, see, and very interestingly, sometimes when I think about who are reserved, I am really confounded by this particular idea. For last 5,000 years, who had been reserved? It is the upper caste who they enjoyed all the resources of this nation, all right? All the resources for 5,000 years they have enjoyed. And after the Constitution, you are just asking for your own, your share of pie, and your heart aches, and that too you are not able to implement. It's very, and now a lot of times you would see even the court, coming to different, giving a lot of verdicts, which will directly go against the spirit of reservation. Okay, so time to time, because when a new system is introduced, in Delhi University itself, around 5,000 posts are vacant, and among these 5,000, around half of it, or even more than half, around 3,000 would go to SC, ST, and OBCs, or even more. But for last 10 years, they haven't been filled up. And in those posts reserved for SC, STs, and OBCs, the other people are teaching. So how will you ensure? How can we see equality? So this is really it is a desirable is that we want to see a casteless society. We want to see equality. We want to see proper equal distribution of wealth. But the one who is holding or hoarding the wealth doesn't want to let it go. Yeah. Let me also read some lessons. The whole idea of a teacher. See, I think whether you read Sharan Kumar Limbale's The Outcast or Jutan by Om Prakash Valmiki, their idea of a teacher, teacher is very, very different. See, and here we have the whole in Indian literature, teacher is eulogized and glorified, but their experience of teacher is, terrorizing, terrorizing. So let me just read some extract from, yes, I think Jutan is very popular and it's very, I think it's familiar to all of us. When the headmaster, he was asking, what to say, Om Prakash Valmiki to go and sweep the sports ground and the yard and everything for 3 days, and what kind of language he uses. See that. Yeah. So all right, so see that teak tree there, go climb that tree, break some twigs and make a broom and sweep the whole school clean as mirror. And it is, after all, your family occupation. Go get it, get to it. And it is happening after the, after the constitution has been implemented in independent India. So headmasters, again, the other children in my class were studying and I was sweeping. Headmaster was sitting in his room and watching me. I was not even allowed to get a drink of water. And the third day I went to the class and sat down quietly. After a few minutes, the headmaster's loud thundering was heard. Abe Chureka, motherfucker, where are you hiding? Your mother. Look at the kind of narrative Indian literature, had. That Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, and Guru Maheshwar, that is completely, dismantled, for a Dalit writer, and his experience does not speak of, Guru as Brahma or Vishnu or Maheshwar. He is a terror, and how he blocks him, he prevents Om Prakash Valmiki from being educated. Okay, and that's the similar experiences of Sharan Kumar Limbale as well. Let me also read one short poem by Vasudev Sunani. Vasudev Sunani is he is almost like a pioneer of Uriya Dalit literature, and his poetry has been translated into English, and it is actually taught in Delhi University. So one of the poems, title is Prayer. What Professor Shankar Dutt was talking about the name, I don't think it is just the name, but it is about the surname. It is about the surname. So because one Dalit can also name. I have a friend, his name is Falguni, so, but I do not think he is like Arjun, or he can have the feeling like Arjun. So there can be different names, but I think what the marker of caste lives in the surname. So please just listen to this poem, Prayer. Come, let us take off our clothes. Let's take off, Mahapatra's coat. Mahapatra is, the title in Odisha, from God Brahma's body. And let us take off Mahante's suit from Vishnu's waist. Let's strip off Tande's dhoti. Tande is a Dalit caste, from Eklavya's body. And Satnam is, Langot. Satnam is also another, I think, tribal from Shambhuk's bottom. Let us all line up naked in front of God, stripped of our ego. We must master our courage, for it is not easy to be naked. It is 100 times still more difficult to strip off our surnames from our names. It is 100 times difficult So the moment, so you introduce to people, people are more interested in knowing your surname. The moment you say your name. And I think in the South, and even in Bihar, I think there are people who just, I think, wouldn't use their surname. They would just use more of a Kumar. Okay, so it is 100 times still more difficult to strip off our surnames from our names. When we are able to do that, we may stand before God in our nakedness and pray to him, oh God, we offer you here in one single bowl all our surnames, Mahapatra, Mohanty, Tandi, Satnami. Can you, in all fairness, return these to us, each his own surname, by simply looking at our faces? Here, the poet is doubting, doubting the existence of God. If God has created, then he should also know, who belongs to which caste. Then if we put all this in a bowl, the surnames, and he should be able to, locate back to them, give back to them, listening to our voices and sampling our blood, then we will be grateful for your godliness and respect your power of cognition. Can you do that, God? Pick from the bowl our respective surnames and return them to each to his own. So I think what there is, I think, again, Professor Shankar Dutt highly talked about the kind of aesthetics the literature should have. So they have, I think, thrown off what the Brahminical literature considered to be beautiful for them. And sometimes it may be very, very radical in nature while reading Dalit literature. But I think that only is talking about their angst and anger, and maybe resistance against inequality, injustice perpetrated. But the bottom line, but the only aim and objective of Dalit literature is to see or to vision a casteless society, a society where there is equality. So I would just read Baba Saheb Ambedkar's Constitution, that when he is the architect of Constitution, and the Preamble of Constitution actually talks about the spirit of, or the desire of this nation. So we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. If you see why Ambedkar changed his religion to Buddhism, and mainly his one very important point was there can never be fraternity or brotherhood in Hinduism. Therefore, he changed to Buddhism. So I hope to see, as Professor Shankar Dutt also quoted Bama, and I also end with that line. And still, there are so many ordeals and hardships and challenges, yet we dream to see a casteless society, a society with equality, justice, and liberty and fraternity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. You have shared a lot of information. Dalit literature, then Odia Dalit literature, then socio-political angles or dimensions of Dalit writings. So I have a couple of questions here. One question, can you hear me? Plaka sir? Can you hear me? Sir, please turn your microphone. Plaka sir, turn your microphone on. Your microphone is not on, sir. Yeah.
No, the host has muted me, so how can I unmute myself?
Oh, sorry. All right. One question.
Yeah.
How can India put an end to the social reservation enjoyed by Brahmins?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. How can India put an end to the social reservation enjoyed by the Brahmins?
Well, I think first they have to be taught. First, the Brahmins have to be taught that caste is a kind of sickness, a cancer, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, is a cancer that is eating away the country. If they understand that, I think only then. First of all, that has to be the first strategy. So we have to, teach them. They have taught a lot of things for last 5,000 years, but now they should also know that now they need to de-learn a lot of things, and unlearn a lot of things. And first we have to begin with that. Only then I think they have to, let it go, consider other people as equal. Because otherwise, as long as Manusmriti reigns in our mind, so, you would see only exclusion as the philosophy which governs this nation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question from Harsh Mathwal. Why caste-based reservation is a logical social justice?
Yeah, because, if you see the spirit of the Constitution, the reservation was primarily given based on the untouchability, social marker. And as I also said that this untouchability also, I think also leads to multiple other deprivations. Okay, but social untouchability or social, I think, exclusion is the main criteria for the reservation. That's why it was caste-based reservation. But now I think, now it is not there. See, now to abhi to EWS bhi aa gaya, or now I think that general, again, they are more reserved than other people.
Sir, there is a strong comment from the audience, Sukanta Devnath, and that is also critique of Dalit literature. That is, Dalit literature, Dalit is not a caste, Dalit is a condition.
Yeah.
Who wants your take or comment over this?
Yes, I already said in my presentation that Dalit is not a caste, it is a condition, mental condition.
All right.
Mental condition. I said in my presentation. Yeah. So which means, again, when we say the word Dalit, if Dalit, it is talking about the external factors which are responsible to have made the condition of this person a Dalit, Dalitized a person. Are you getting that? So that is the meaning of Dalit. So it is more of the external factors who are responsible or who have been responsible to have Dalitized a person. That's why it is more of a political term, and that's so. This is this word coming from Dalit movement. Of course, Phule also used first, then Ambedkar, but then later on it was popularized. But it is actually talking about the external factors responsible to have Dalitized some section of the people. So therefore, it is rather showing to the people who are responsible rather than to themselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Almost all students, research scholar, faculty have written one line, great presentation by Palaka, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah, greetings from Delhi University.
All right, thank you.
Everyone.
Thank
you, I enjoyed.
Whenever you have time and holiday, you must visit to Veer in University.
Sure.
You are
Thank you.
particularly my college, Jagjiwan College, Ara. Right.
Thank you,
you.
Aslam Saab. Thank you
Thank
so much.
Now I invite Dr. Smriti Singh, but before that, I would like to read her brief profile. Ma'am, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Aslam. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you keeping, ma'am?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm quite well, thank you. Now, we are impatiently waiting for your lecture. But first, let me read your bio note.
Sure, Aslam.
I mean, to especially audience. Dr. Smriti Singh is an associate professor of English in the Department of HSS at IIT Patna. She has been engaged in teaching English language and literature since 2001. She has started her career from Patna Women's College, Patna, and then went to University of Texas at Austin as a Fulbright scholar. She was the founding faculty at Chanakya National Law University. Dr. Singh research interests are in areas of English language teaching, literary theories, and Indian writing in English. But I think you have also expertise in contemporary, yeah, you have mentioned contemporary literary theories and criticism. All right. I request you, ma'am, to kindly address the gathering. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Aslam. Professor Tiwari, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Veer Singh University, Ara, Dr. Jawaharlal Principal, Jagjiwan College, Ara, Professor Shankar Ashish Dutt, former Head Department of English, Patna University, and the Chief Guest for today's function, Dr. Palaka, Guest of Honor for today's webinar, the convener, Dr. Aslam Parvez, the joint conveners, Dr. Ghosh and Ms. Rai, faculty colleagues and participants, warm greetings from Indian Institute of Technology, Patna. It's been a pretty long afternoon, so we've had really two very interesting sessions where the speakers have covered almost everything. So as far as I'm concerned, in this particular talk, I'm not delving into the definition of the term Dalit or Dalit literature and their analysis as such and the connotations and denotations therein. But what I'm trying to attempt at is to explore the ideas of space, gaze, and economy in relation to women, represented in select Dalit writings. So, Aslam ji, I need to share the screen. Please give me the permission.
Yes. Just wait for a while, ma'am.
Sure.
Okay, now you can proceed in sharing.
Thank you so much. So I hope this is visible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've titled this talk as Intercepting the Gaze, Women in Select Dalit Narratives.
Ma'am, can you?
Just a sec. So, yes, please, Aslam.
Ah.
I'm going into the slideshow mode.
Yeah, please.
So this is basically the outline of the presentation. So, I mean, this is something that's been said over the last 1.5 hours. So I really need not repeat this. I guess by the end of the afternoon, we should go out from this webinar as people with a lot more empathy, and a lot more mental liberation. So the text that I've chosen for discussion is Jutan, Akarmashi, Untouchable, and A Fine Balance. And my major concern is to look at the representation of the Dalit women by the male Dalit writers and by the male non-Dalit writers. So identity and memory are closely related to subjectivity. Subjectivity invites us to consider the question of how and from where identity arises, and to what extent it is understandable, and to what degree it is something over which we have any measure of influence or control. Quoting Hall. Dalit literature, in a way, breaks away from the elite documentation of Dalit subjectivity or identity. They are breaking away from the identity given to them by society through the Lacanian symbolic order. The I of Dalit consciousness is suppressed by society through its laws, belief systems, and hegemonizes them in such a way that the subject accepts his subjection. And the process of writing or narration is one of the ways to free that subject. Just as archives work as knowledge resource for the historian, memory works for the writers. It is not just a gateway to the past, but also helps record the history of the suppressed. In a way, representations in literature is a way of reconstructing social history, and in case of Dalit literature, a way of asserting the Dalit I. This brings us to the central issue of representation of women in texts by Dalit and non-Dalit writers. As seen, I'm looking at the writings by male writers to study the ideas of space, gaze, and economy. I'm not looking at exploring the idea of the self gazing at itself. That can be one more area which can be done if we take up the works of the women Dalit writers. The concept of gaze was introduced by Sartre in Being and Nothingness. We become conscious of ourselves when we are confronted with the gaze of another. An apt example is the depiction of the character of Sohini in Untouchable. It is only when we are aware of being watched, then we become aware of our presence. And it is in the way that she is portrayed, or even the way Baka perceives her and looks at her, that we become conscious of this whole idea of watching and being watched at. The idea has been explored through Freud's use of the term scopophilia, which briefly means the pleasure is in looking. And one of the things that is looked at in almost all the four texts that I've picked up is the female body. An analysis of the depiction and description of female bodies in each of the texts mentioned here would show how the female body becomes an object of voyeuristic pleasure. And as Laura Mulvey wrote, woman is an object that is objectified, and in a world under threat by sexual imbalance, the gaze is split between the active male and the passive female. Space is another topic that becomes center to all these writings. And before actually entering the writings, I want to go through the terms. So we look at space from two angles. First, as social production, and secondly, the whole idea of the body as space. Henry Lefebvre, in The Production of Space, argues that space is a social product or a complex social construction. Multiple spaces are socially produced, but what role or space do women get in these spaces? Spaces serve as tools of thought and action, and also as means of power. In a similar vein, Foucault, in his concept of the panoptical, explores the idea of body as space. Certain social practices and relations require certain settings for their conduct. Look at the spatial settings of the Dalit colonies in the chosen text. The space of living, and one is forced to raise these issues. Though these spaces are not like Foucault's disciplinary spaces, nevertheless, they do not let the residents forget their status in life and the residual space they must occupy. The outcasts' colonies are also socio-spatial dimensions of exercise of power. The third idea explored is the notion of the Manikin Allegory, which is derived from Faно's employment of the expression to refer to the dichotomy that informs the relation between the colonizer and the colonized. And it has been extended by Abdul R. Jan Muhammad in his concept of the Manikin Allegory to embrace the economic feature of the process of imperialism. And the same concept works in Indian society as far as gender is concerned. I'm not quoting the quote which I've put here. The dominant model of power and interest relations in colonial societies is the Manikin opposition between the superiority of the European and the inferiority of the native. The axis provides the main fiction of colonialist literary representation, a field of diverse yet interchangeable oppositions between black and white, good and evil, superiority and inferiority, civilization and savagery, subject and object. The application of this concept to Dalit writings to study the position of women shows that most discourse by the high caste writers hardly focuses on the plight of Dalits, least of all the plight of Dalit women. If the Dalits find reference in such writings, it is at an inferior level. They are depicted as dirty, unclean scavengers. Their characters are not developed. They are flat in nature, as if the writers are insinuating that one can be easily exchanged for another. The issue of race in Manikin Allegory becomes relevant to the study of women in Dalit literature, as it helps to foreground women and escape the system of representation forced by the hegemonic others. Women need an independent identity, history, self-perception, and representation in the same manner in which the colonized nations need to be free from the notions created by the colonizers. In all the four books selected, at the center of discussion are the men. The women are relegated to the margin, except in Limbale's Akarmashi, where he acknowledges his mother while tracing his history. My history is my mother's life. At the most, my grandmother's. The question is, how do we create the self, especially the female self? Generally, the male self is created through empowerment and exercise of choice, but these options are not available to women, especially the Dalit women. Right from birth, the child is interpolated and taught verbal and behavioral habits taught to the female gender. The Dalit girl is taught that she is secondary not only to the high castes, but also to the boys of a community. Ideology too has an important role in maintaining the status quo. It is an imaginary construction that represents the real world, and we never learn to question it. We face the various kinds of violence, but accept it with fatalism as fate. and the women become passive victims not just to the men of their community, but also to the society at large. Ideology freezes history and represents it as something unalterable, to quote Eagleton. Due to this, one may say that in India, the Dalits have been relegated to the margins since ancient times. And though changes are coming, the process is a slow one and involves continuous struggle against those that have economic as well as political power. The power dynamics that work in the outside world take a parallel shape within the house. The Dalit men are victimized outside the house, and in turn, they victimize the women in the house. Dukhi Mochi, after being thrashed at Thakur Premji's house, lashed out at his wife Rupa when she inquires about his injury. "Leave me alone," he hissed in response to Rupa's fearful inquiries. When she persisted clinging to his side, begging to be allowed to examine his foot, he struck her. What we are reminded of are colonial times when the colonized native took out the anger and frustration of the outside world in the house on his women. Similarly, Lakha in Untouchable shouts at his daughter for tea and food in order to preserve his authority. Abusing, shouting, and beating women are means exercised by men to preserve their power and authority within the walls of the home. Feminist activists as well as academicians have found the notion of the public-private divide useful. The public-private has been the bedrock for critiques of patriarchy and liberal feminist strategic efforts to mobilize the legislative and judicial powers of the state to intervene on behalf of women in private spheres and to create equitable public spaces. Looking at the notion of the public-private in the context of Dalit writings and life, we find that Dalit women have more mobility than high caste women. The high caste women are confined to the house, but the Dalit women move in the outside world. This makes them more vulnerable to exploitation by men of the upper caste as well as the men of their caste. Both Untouchable and A Fine Balance shows women inside the house, whether it is Sohini or Rupa. Both are confined to the house and engage in household activities. When they cross the threshold, it is not for personal gain, but for the family. Both leave home to fetch food for the family. Sohini goes to the caste well to get water for tea. Rupa leaves the house in the middle of the night to get milk or fruit for her son Ishwar. There are cases when these women cross the threshold, but then that is when they are again exploited. Again, the space is very limited. Inside the house, they are like unpaid servants whose voice goes unheard, and outside they are treated as objects meant to do the dirty work or objects for men to indulge their passion on. This idea of women being the unpaid servants in the house and household labor being another link in the chain of female subjugation has been the contribution of the Marxist to feminist thought, which attacks the prevailing capitalist system as sexually and economically exploitative. Rupa has no say when Dukhi decides to send his sons to live with Ashraf and learn the art of tailoring. Sohini has the ability to speak. We hear her voice when she asks Kulabo not to abuse her, and later when Bakha asks her to tell him what happened at the temple. But like all women, she is a split subject who is watched by men and older women. And then women turn themselves into objects because femininity itself is defined as being gazed upon by men. And this can be seen in the life of Santamai. Though she lives with a Muslim whom Limbale calls Dada, this man is not his grandfather. Santamai was once caught by Dada talking to an imam and he got angry. Whenever he was drunk, he would abuse Santamai. Masamai, Limbale's mother, had to leave her husband and two small children due to village gossip. Such incidents show the vulnerable position of Dalit women. Limbale points to this vulnerability when he mentions that Pami and Indra returned from the in-laws' place after completing some rituals, and they were never to go back as the in-laws had come to know that Masamai was a Mahar. These instances show that Dalit women are treated as subjects not naturally, but through societal constructions. The individuals are constituted as the bearers of positions through the effects of social relations, to quote Apsley and Wesley. In Marxist theory, commodity fetishism is a state of social relation said to arise in capitalist-based societies in which social relations are transformed into objective relations between commodities or money. It is the belief that value inheres in commodities instead of being added to them through labor. In other words, capitalists fetishize commodities. For example, a well in the village might have been dug up by the Mahars or other outcasts, but these people are not allowed to use its water. The object becomes important in capitalist and caste-based societies, and this deals a death blow to interpersonal relations. This includes the labor performed at home for which women are not paid anything. To quote from Limbale's text, at home, Shivanta was like an ox harnessed to the oil press that goes round and round in a dark room from morning till evening. It was sheer drudgery. According to Linda Howell, for most women, the home is a site of social relations that are structured by part and inequality. It is the location of unpaid labor. Similarly, Valmiki tells us of the work his mother and sister-in-law did. They worked not only in the fields, but also cleaned the bed huts and the ghars of 8 or 10 Tagas, both Hindus and Muslims. For all this and other work done, they would be paid grains, given leftover rotis, and sometimes jutan or scraps. This illustrates the devaluation and dehumanization of human labor. The chuhras are good enough to be used for the purpose of labor, but too dirty to be treated with equality. The Dalit women trade their labor power for wages, which is paid to them in the form of leftovers or jutan. Women are also used as items of exchange. Daughters are given away for daughters-in-law. Limbadi had to tolerate abuse and insults from his in-laws just because his sister was married into their family. Widow remarriage is also reduced to an exchange. Valmiki narrates how Sukhbir's wife was married to his younger brother Jasbir. The change in partners in the lives of the women show how they are treated as secondary beings who have no existence without men. Shyamlal Chacha's wife, Ram Katori, started living with Solhar Chacha after Shyamlal left the house. In the case of women, the object can be sexual favors to the richer upper caste men, which also leads to their becoming commodities. Limbale's mother sold liquor for money, but her customers would start flirting with her. And we can easily say that a phallocentric social order dominates not only the economic, but also the sexual life. Pandit Kalinath forgets his religiosity when he sees Sohini at the well waiting for water. Later in the novel, he tries to molest her. And when Sohini shouts for help, he starts the hue and cry that he has been polluted. One can say that while Dalit women are considered untouchable or dirty due to the centuries-old philosophy, they are acceptable by the upper caste for sexual purposes. Mystery in a Fine Balance shows how Dalit women are disfigured for refusing sexual favors. Dukhi Mochi's father asked his wife if she had seen Buddhu's wife. Hearing the negative reply, he told her she refused to go to the field with the Zamindar's son, so they shaved her head and walked her naked through the square. Dukhi's wife Rupa also had to face sexual abuse at the hands of the orchard watchman when she went to steal fruits for her sons. If she had refused him sexual favors, he would have threatened to call the orchard owners, who probably would have tortured her more sexually and physically. And Dalit men are too helpless to avenge their women's honor. Baka feels like killing the priest, but the servility ingrained in him overrides his feelings. Dukhi lets out his shame, anger, humiliation in tears, but he did not have the courage to talk to Rupa about the incident or confront the perpetrators. And mind you, these are not just literary representations, or one could excuse oneself by saying that, okay, these are just works of fiction. They are not fiction, they are parts of autobiographies. And we have every day in the newspapers realistic episodes of such events happening through the length and breadth of our country. If we look at the presence of the women in the house, we find that none of the writers give us a glimpse of their private space. The writers do not give us a view of their mental processes, their thoughts. We are presented the public space. The woman is silent and oppressed. She lacks individuality and is objectified. Within the family, she is treated as sexual object. Joseph quotes Donna Sullivan's observation in the public-private distinction in international human law. The demarcation of public and private life within society is an inherently political process that both reflects and reinforces power relations, especially the power relations of gender, race, class. And clearly from the instances mentioned, space is again the site of power. And Dalit women may have the freedom to move freely, but ultimately they are in the same subjugated and exploited space. The Dalit women are abused by their own menfolk. Limbali narrates the story of Dhanava, whose husband has died and she was made pregnant by her own father, who said, I have sown the seed from which she has grown as a plant. Why shouldn't I eat the fruits of this plant? Women are not only objects for sexual gratification, but also represent family honor or esteem. Limbali himself is guilty of beating his sister when he found her talking to the Patil's son. Limbali mentions an incident when the Patil of Fanur, with whom his mother was sleeping, brought home Hanmanta, Limbali's father, and wanted his mother to sleep with him, Hanmanta. Such objectification is insulting in the extreme, and in such situations, women must either use violence or silently accept such treatment. A reading of all the four texts shows that women are constituted as racialized sexual stereotypes. And such ideas take shape due to the ideology of the indigenous patriarchy, which is the same in both the dominating and dominated groups. Just as the Hindu nationalists equated women with figures of deities, similarly, Baka in Untouchable and Valmiki in Jutan find the spirit of female gods of Hindu mythology in their mothers. When Baka thinks of his mother, it is of someone generous, giving, always giving, mother, giver of life, Mahalakshmi. Similarly, Valmiki felt that goddess Durga had entered his mother when Sukhdev Singh Tyagi refused to give her food at his daughter's marriage and asked her to take only the leftovers. Such a paradigm deprives women of self-presence and shows how culture and religion produce certain beliefs and ideas. Coming to the question of the representation of women by non-Dalits, a few questions come to the mind. Do the non-Dalits seek compassion or sympathy, or are they truly representative of the trials and tribulations faced by the Dalit women? It has often been said that writing of Dalit representations by non-Dalits, as Professor Dutt says, lacks a visceral impact, and that an outstanding work of Dalit literature would be born only when Dalit life would present itself from the Dalit point of view. And so, to quote Professor Dutt, there's the danger of falling into two traps. One is of considering the non-Dalits as a homogeneous entity complicit with Brahminical social order. And the second one is to consider the category of Dalit as a monolith. So seen from the perspective of the men, the narratives by Anand and Mystery seek not to evoke compassion for the Dalits, but also to become agencies for resistance in the manner of the writings of Limbale and Valmiki. But then, do women see these writings as instruments for resistance? Generally, we would answer that no, they do not. They are mostly occupying a secondary position. And what we readers are presented with in the narration is the depiction of their everyday trials and tribulations, and we do not get to hear their voice. So the question is, who will speak for these women? And the issue is the same one as in the case of who would speak for the black or the brown woman. So one can always go on to say that the most authentic portrayal would probably come from the women themselves. But then, are we going to use the category of the women to again gaze at the light? So authenticity is there in these works. Most of these works are based on experience rather than speculation, and have actually stirred up thinking amongst the Dalit intellectuals and among the women who've started stepping out and exposing the master historical narratives and creating localized narratives which would give an authentic portrayal of their physical and mental traumas and troubles. So thank you so much for hearing. Questions are, for listening, questions are welcome.
Thank you, ma'am, for wonderful presentation. There are few questions. Noor Alam Bengali. According to K.A. Gita, there is a domination and exploitation of Dalit women even within the Dalit and by the so-called upper class people. It looks they are doubly marginalized by the male chauvinism. how can this double marginalization of Dalit women be eradicated?
I don't know if you've seen this movie. What was it? Article 15 or Article 17? Ayushman Khurrana movie, where these two Dalit girls had been raped and one had been killed. But he manages to find out the other. So this kind of dehumanization will only end when we truly go in for education, rather than just getting degrees of BA, BSc, BTech, MTech, and a PhD. We are literates. We are not actually educated. So, I mean, all oppression, all marginalization that we've talked about from morning till now, this can only end when not just one person or one community is educated, but everyone is educated. But otherwise, in all cases, what is the situation is that today you are the oppressed. Tomorrow you gain economic or political power. You also join forces with the oppressor. We are not able to break up this particular dichotomy or polarizations that are there. The day we break down these polarizations, we will have an equitable society and possibly no such marginalizations and exploitations.
Thank you, ma'am. There is another question from Ratna Singh. Yeah, I'm agree. Women are judged by their gender, but not by their abilities. Very sick of it. What could women should do for proof themselves? Is there necessary to highlight them? Can men universe see it?
See, I mean, the problem to all solutions is that people need to have the third eye open and look at things. Otherwise, I mean, it's like we are just working and we're just trying to prove ourselves on an equitable footing with our male counterparts. There's no shortcut to this. I mean, I really cannot say that if we give all the men paracetamol 650 mg 3 times a day, all ills will be removed from society. If that could happen, I mean, that was the easiest thing we could have done. Everybody take paracetamol and get rid of all problems of society.
One question from Ashu Aman. What is your point of view, ma'am, on removal of caste-based reservation and maybe its replacement with income-based reservation? Are you okay?
I'm just fine. I'm just thinking of this. I mean, even let's say we've removed all caste-based reservation, we've replaced it with income-based representation because amongst the upper caste also, you do have poor people. It's not that all upper caste means all rich people. And scheduled caste or reserved caste means all poor people. So even if you replace it with economic reservation and people make economic gains and they improve their status or their standards in life, are they going to genuinely give up that reservation? Even the caste-based reservation was supposed to be given up once the situation in life became better, but people are not ready to give it up. So the same thing may happen with economic-based reservation. So rather than reservation, if we really have a system where we provide similar kind of education to everybody, possibly we won't need reservation. If we have free and compulsory education till the age of 14, and after that work out a mode. So possibly when your entire population is educated, you may not need reservation at all.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now it's a really wonderful session and your take to all questions. I invite you tomorrow to give your time for other speakers to also.
Sure.
I have invited some wonderful scholar like T. Mark sir and Jagjiwan sir, right? So for tomorrow. Now on behalf, thank you, ma'am, thank you. On behalf of Jagjiwan College.
Thank you so much, Aslam.
All right. On behalf of Jagjiwan College, ARA, I express gratitude to all speakers and participants, and I request them to be present and be the part of this national webinar on 10:30, right? So for hope tomorrow we will be listening wonderful speaker like T. Mark sir from Pondicherry University, Department of English, and Jagjiwan sir from Manu, Hyderabad, from the Department of Sociology. So now I would like to end this session, first day of the session. Thank you all. Thank you for support. Thank you.